Hey, it is Thursday. It is June 18th, 2015. Coming to you live from the studios of the Hagmann Hagmann Report here in Northwest Pennsylvania. I'm Doug Hagmann at the helm, a fellow investigator, researcher, and most importantly, my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann Hagmann Report, America's premier father-son investigative team. Our job, of course, is to bring you the news that propels the headlines, the news that is twisted and shaped and convoluted and hidden amid a funhouse of smoke and mirrors in the carnival that we call the corporate media. We do the headline and news triage so you don't have to. We just want to thank all of our listeners from across the globe. Thank you so much for your time, for your dedication to listening to this program. We promise to leave you with more information than you came. And we recognize the fact that you really you come here for information. You come here for unbiased, unfettered truth. And this is what we attempt to provide for you based on our sources, our exclusive, if you will, original investigative sources and resources. Folks, our home base on the Internet is HagmannandHagmann.com. That's HagmannandHagmann.com. From there, you can access us live as well as our previous shows. Just click the RSS feed where it says subscribe to the RSS feed. Now that'll take you to a listing of our previous shows. SoundCloud has been updated with more recent shows. A link there on to SoundCloud. And you can also access our social networking sites, HagmannandHagmann.com. And individually, we've got individual social networking sites there on Facebook. It's not heavily trafficked. In other words, we don't abuse the privilege, and certainly we don't go into what we do every day. Okay, this is just merely for program information and for important bits of news and original investigative reports. So definitely bookmark HagmannandHagmann.com and our social networking sites, as well as the link to the past programming as well, and SoundCloud, definitely. Tonight we're going to be talking about a number of things. First and foremost, of course, it's difficult not to get around or not to discuss what happened in Charleston. But by the way, a programming note, many of you were expecting John, the Hollywood insider, to appear tonight. He is ill tonight. I talked to him earlier today. Oh, man, the poor guy. He's got the flu. And certainly it would not have been a good idea for him to come on tonight. So let's keep him in our prayers. And it's interesting, too. The timing is interesting because he came down with the flu. Well, I'll just say the timing is interesting. You can read into it what you will.
And I mean, getting into such a deep subject such as the satanic elements and influences in Hollywood, you have to be on top of your game, really, when getting into these things, because I know he has a lot of specific facts, examples, quotes. And,
and he's been an eyewitness. He's been an eyewitness to some pretty heavy-duty things, and I don't want to say any more than that. I don't want to sound mysterious, but there are some security considerations as well. For example, where he's at right now might not be the best place to be doing a broadcast such as this. So he's going to be joining us next Wednesday to discuss this topic. And that's good, too, because there is a lot of information, a lot of background information. We had talked a little bit about this last Friday and then this past Monday, about the Committee of 300, Tavistock, about the referenced certain things, such as the Beatles and music, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Now, I know that some people consider that different from Hollywood, although it is it really you can't separate that because it's a Hollywood production, and actually it's a British / American intelligence production.
Much like TV shows, with the musicians, you have writers.
That's right.
You have, choreographers, people who, the artist is basically a talent for possibly singing or lip syncing or making it look good. Everything else is done for them. What songs are going to come out to be singles? It's very detailed and in depth.
That's right. Well, the big news for today, of course, is, and we all know this. We how can you escape this news? Sadly, we saw a shooting take place last evening while we were on the air, as a matter of fact, in Charleston, South Carolina. Of course, Dylan Storm Roof. That is the name of the perpetrator. Folks, take a look at his arrest or mugshot, if you will. Take a look at the surveillance images, still images from the surveillance video. Who does he look like? And are you seeing a certain? Is there a familiarity? Is there a familiar look to these individuals? These mass shooting individuals? And isn't it convenient? Now, back in May of 2012, somebody had just sent me a link earlier today of my interview with Alex Jones, May 4th, 2012, where we were talking about my DHS source insider at that time saying race wars. They were really pushing the race war issue. And of course, you had the Trayvon Martin situation back then, but all of these incidents of violence. Take a good hard look at this. Now, you're going to have some people yelling it's a false flag at the top of their lungs. Well, define false flag. Okay, does that mean it's purely a government operation? There's a lot of complexity to what we're seeing. I guess the one thing I don't want people to do is speak to the point where they marginalize themselves because they are overstating their case in a manner that cannot be proven or bore out right now. In other words, what I'm saying to you is this incident certainly looks bad, it smells bad, it has the feel of a false flag type of an operation. And when I say false flag, I'm talking about an incident that was either known about previously and allowed to happen, or was a direct result of behavior modification through drugs or external influences. And there could be many external influences that led this young man to do this horrific deed. Okay, that's what I mean by false flag. And I believe in that context, what we're seeing here is, by that definition, potentially a false flag. Now, having said that, the other side of this is the exploitation, the blowback. What is going to happen because of this incident? There's the cause, and then there's the reaction, or the cause, the action, and the reaction. So what we're looking at here is something that, to me, is complex, more complex than a few headlines and a few blurbs on television. You're looking at a very methodical operation where this young man could be a victim himself of mind control. Now, before people start ripping their hair out and saying, wait a minute, mind control, come on, Now, I'm not talking about, hypnotism or anything. No, I'm talking about directed mind control through the use of pharmaceuticals. We know that, or we're being told now, that Dylan Storm Roof was taking a drug that had been linked with sudden outbursts of violence. And this does fit a pattern of other mass shooters who were on or had recently come off of these pharmaceutical drugs linked to a certain type of violence. So this is not, obviously, this is not something that can be explained away in just a few short sentences. We have to take a look at this in the context in which it happened. But more importantly, what is going to be the result or the consequences from this? We see, of course, race relations, the embers of racial violence being continually stoked by Obama and more importantly, the people around Obama. He's not doing any favors for race relations. They want chaos to erupt in this country. You can go back and consult Kissinger and all of the other globalists talking about military in our streets, and we're going to be talking about just that tonight as well. The background, we're going to delve deeper into this than just paying lip service to the incident itself, okay? Because it's important. And watch, folks, this is the other thing too. Carefully watch what other people are doing, other media people are doing in the wake of this incident. Just be very, when you see other media personalities descending upon Charleston, ostensibly for goodwill purposes, or perhaps to represent a certain race or agenda, question the motivation behind that. I'm trying to speak very carefully here. Just question the motivation behind it. We are in a very dangerous period. And also, think about what Russ Dizdar said last night. And he was on our program from 8 to 11 last night. During his appearance, in fact, early on in his appearance, we were talking about the satanic crimes. And remember what Russ said about the dates, the satanic ritualistic dates, some pretty hot dates, pretty dates to watch for. And I even asked him to repeat those dates.
Yeah. Do you have them handy?
I did in my pile of notes here.
If I remember correctly, the 18th to the 22nd, and oh goodness.
Well, regardless, July 1st, of course, is an important date, but what he did say was the run up to these dates extremely important. I don't have the notes handy, but regardless of that, the satanic aspect of things is also a factor in this. We cannot disconnect or detach the spiritual from the physical at this point. We have to acknowledge that there is a spiritual component to these crimes, and I think Russ made a very, very good case for the violence and evil in general, and this certainly would serve as an exhibit of that. So understand what's behind a lot of what we're seeing here, and of course you've got a generation now of which this Dylan Storm roof, what a name, by the way, or Dylan, I don't know, Dylan I guess would be the proper pronunciation. You've got a generation here at his young age of 21 being brought up on really violent video games, the technotronics of the era, the iPhones, iPads, the computers, everything that would affect your mental acuity, your mental biases, your emotional states. So this is pretty significant what we're seeing here. Think back to the early days of Well, think back to the 60s, for example, the 50s and 60s, late 50s, 60s, anything post-World War II, and think about the role the Tavistock Institute played in behavioral modification. We spoke about this. Think about the music and how the music has evolved into more deadly music today. And look at the cocktail, the mixture of psychotronic or psychotropic drugs that are being used and prescribed to these loners. Aren't we seeing just a bunch of loners? If you look at the picture of Dylan here, who immediately comes to your mind? Adam Lanza, perhaps? I mean, could they be brothers? You know, it's just an amazing thing. But what is this all telling us? What's going on here in the larger sense? If we take a few steps back and put Charlotte in the proper context, and we pray for the victims of Charlotte, South Carolina. We certainly, our prayers and sympathies and our heart goes out to every victim, everyone touched by the violence there. But and by all means, understand that we grieve as well for the victims. This should not be happening, but let's place the blame where it needs to be placed. Of course, the shooter, yes, but the shooter, perhaps in this case, it might come out that he was a victim of sorts as well. That's not to excuse, and please understand this, I'm not excusing at all his behavior. I'm just trying to understand here all of the components and all the factors that are involved in this. Because it would be very easy to say, well, he's just an evil seed, an evil kid. Well, there is evil, certainly, but is he a product of an intentional orchestration of an evil agenda? Could he be? We're over the next several days, I'm sure we're going to be finding out more, and I think that the evidence will point to the fact that he is a product, was and is a product of something far greater than just parental neglect. What will be borne out here is the fact that his actions are going to be greater than the sum of all of the parts that led up to his actions. But one thing, the title of tonight's program is America the Battlefield. Now, the first part of the program here I'm going to take and discuss about America and the battlefield that is America and the war that's being waged right now, and how it will become hot. And I've said this before. My DHS source had told me, it's going hot. Now, when I said that, and when I say that, people automatically think, well, does that mean tomorrow? I mean, the fuse has been lit. No, the fuse has been lit. How long that fuse is, we don't know. But what we're seeing right now, in my view, and what was explained to me, is really the necessary groundwork for the internal civil war, which we will be fighting in a manner that will make the Civil War pale in comparison in terms of death and bloodshed, given the refinement of the weapons that we have today and the additional population in the stacked and packed cities and other factors that will act as force multipliers. But, today, is America a free country? When you and I, ladies and gentlemen, when we tell our families or friends or coworkers that America is no longer a free country, don't you get kind of weird looks like, hey, yeah, we are? The people, the reactions is almost understandable, I suppose. We're continually told by politicians, by the media, and even popular elements of popular culture about how we're the freest nation on earth. We're told that the reason people from other countries hate us is because they resent our freedom. Of course, they don't resent our drones. They resent our freedom. But if you put aside for a moment the propaganda and honestly look at modern American life, the idea that we are no longer a free country, it doesn't seem that outrageous. Ron Paul wrote a foreword to John Whitehead's book, John Whitehead wrote the foreword to Battlefield America, The War on the American People. This book was just released. In fact, it's John Whitehead's second after A Government of Wolves. But Ron Paul had said, if Americans were truly free, then would the NSA be able to monitor our emails and other online activity without obtaining a warrant? Would we have to submit to the TSA's harassment every time we boarded an aircraft? Would local governments use red light cameras to enrich themselves and deny us due process of law? Would we hear on an almost a daily basis stories of how these special weapons and tactics teams are terrorizing, even murdering innocent Americans by way of no-knock raids? Would we watch in horror as police respond to peaceful protesters with military force? And we've all seen that. Would armed federal agents invade Amish farms because those farmers dared to sell raw milk to willing consumers? Of course, we're told that these infringements on liberty are all for our own good. And isn't that always the way? It's for our good. How else is the government supposed to protect us from terrorists or stop us from using dangerous drugs or drinking raw milk? Goodness, unless they have the unrestrained power to spy and harass and even shoot us with weapons developed primarily for use in war. Well, fortunately, thanks to programs like InfoWars, and hopefully our program does a lot, and many in the alternative media, many Americans, a growing number of Americans, including a large number of the younger generation, they're beginning to question whether we are really better off trading away our liberties for this fake, false sense of security. And many other Americans who have not yet accepted the entire libertarian paradigm, they too have been motivated by some outrageous examples of government overreach, abuses. And look at Edward Snowden. Look at the revelations there. And it's interesting, too. Now, Edward Snowden, ladies and gentlemen, have you seen where he's come under attack by many? And some might say Edward Snowden's a plant. But regardless, the revelations. Forget the messenger for a moment. Look at the message. Look at the revelations. The extent to which the National Security Agency has been spying on Americans. The militarization of the police today, and I'm going to give you some facts here in a moment, which I do believe are going to be eye-opening here. But individuals who wish to move America in a pro-liberty direction, is it too late? Well, who's to say? But if that is your cause, celeb, if that's what you want to do, or at least try to do as we are living today, we have to stand in the gap, don't we? So if we want to move this country in a more positive direction, while we are battling the spiritual, we must not only understand how far we've drifted from a free society, but we must truly understand the true nature of what's really taking place. This is why we do the program, and we get in deep into these subjects, because it's one thing just to see the headlines and see how bad things are getting, but in order to move us to a better position, we've got to grasp the true nature of the current system. We've got to understand the playbook that's being used against us. And sadly, even the people who are in search of answers or looking for this, they have drifted so far. They fail to understand the nature of what's taking place. You know, some people think that all it will take to restore our liberty and to bring back the country we once had is through the next election. You know, replace a liberal Democrat with a conservative Republican. We've been over this. You know that's not the case. But the delusion, and that's a delusion, is encouraged by the captive corporate media. And this is something that we have to make sure, and so many people are just having, grabbing that, holding on to that with a death grip. The captive corporate media, the Illuminati-controlled media, they encourage this delusion, which exaggerates relatively minor squabbles between the parties into major ideological clashes. That's what they say. But the rarely spoken truth is that the establishment of both parties supports the welfare to warfare police state. Those who still believe there is a serious difference between the two parties really need to ask themselves why there is such a remarkable similarity between the foreign civil liberties and even economic policies, we'll say between the Bush and Obama administrations, the Bush administration or the Bush regime and the Obama regime. This sounds like this is kindergarten talk, but we have to go back to the basics with a lot of people, especially those who we are trying to awaken. The description today that best fits a modern America. Folks, let me ask you a question. One word that fits modern America or today's America. We live in a blank state, okay? What would that blank represent? We live in a free state? We live in a democratic state? No. We live in a fascist state right now, today. And some people would say, "Oh, that's too extreme," or that's beyond kooky or conspiratorial. But if you look carefully at the historical definition of a fascist regime, well, you'll see that fascist may be the most accurate descriptive term to define the current system operating in America. Because under a fascist system, property is nominally held in private hands and the economy is officially free. All appearances to the contrary. However, the economy in a fascist system is carefully controlled by government through this maze of taxes, this maze of regulations. And this government control is usually exercised for the benefit of an economic elite that works to perpetuate the power of the existing political class. Now, this is where our discussion next hour will be with the TPP and the TPA and the treaties there. But other characteristics of a fascist system definitely include the militarization of our police, a militaristic foreign policy, and a police state that abuses our civil liberties. We are so far down that road. And only the purposely deceitful or the willfully ignorant could or will deny that America's foreign policy is, my goodness, what the heck was that? Okay, hang on.
This is a pop-up ad.
Yeah, I'm going to have to, sorry about that.
As Firefox and Chrome update, and you configure the settings for those pop-ups, it seems as though those pop-ups create new settings after you block them, subdue them.
My apologies for that. That's to me, that's a pretty sophomore mistake, but oh well. That's what endears us because we're not professionals. But anyway, or so they tell me, right? But there we go. Okay, thank you for that. Let me just do this. I can do this.
That. Okay, now I understand. I was having trouble wondering where that was coming from.
Yeah,
but
there we go.
Yeah, it's different. And that's what's going
on. I had an issue with my computer last night, and I was talking to Ted Broer, and this is kind of a side note. I was talking to Ted Broer, who said, your email's compromised. He attempted to send an email, and a lot of funny things happened when he tried that. But having said that, so I was locked out of my own computer. I was locked out of my own computer today. Okay, so I had to bring in the backup, and that's what you hear. It wasn't configured for studio use. It was my office. But the other characteristics of a fascist system, again, as I was saying, it includes a militaristic foreign policy and a police state that abuses our civil liberties. A fascist system also singles out the critics of the regime for harassment. Now, we've seen this take place. I mean, haven't we? Of course we have. From stopping intellectuals who are critical of America think about the people who have been stopped from coming into this country, who have been critical of America. Think about the journalists who have been harassed just because what they write is displeasing to the current regime. Remember Jack Anderson? How many people remember Jack Anderson? Remember his columns? I think Washington Merry-Go-Round. I was going through some old newspapers back from the early 1970s. This is during the Watergate era, and I was looking with extreme interest at many of Jack Anderson's columns, the Washington Merry-Go-Round, during that era. Fascinated by what I was reading. In the intimation, the ties to the Kennedy assassination. Very interesting. And also in the run-up to the Church Committee. Very vocal critic. But having said that, we've got a current regime sicking the IRS on organizations critical of the current regime's policies. Government harassment of their political critics has become more common today than ever before. Nixon is made out to look like a choir boy in light of what's taking place. Here are some facts I want to just give to you. Consider what's taking place today, or consider these facts, and consider America as a fascist country. Today, 17,000 local police forces are equipped with such military equipment as Black Hawk helicopters, machine guns, grenade launchers, battering rams, explosives, chemical sprays, body armor, night vision, repelling gear, armored vehicles, and even tanks. Okay? 17,000 municipal police departments. Fact, thanks to an overabundance of a 4,500 plus federal crimes and 400,000 plus rules and regulations, it is estimated that the average American actually commits 3 felonies a day without knowing it. We have heard this before. Where did that statement come from? According to law professor John Baker, there is no one in the United States over the age of 18 who cannot be indicted for some federal crime. Now think about that. The laws were set up that way. If you're over 18, you can be indicted for some obscure federal crime you don't even know existed. The number of violent crimes in the country is down substantially, the lowest rate in 40 years, I should add, while the number of Americans being jailed for non-violent crimes, for example, driving with a suspended driver's license, those numbers are skyrocketing. Despite the fact that we've got 46 million Americans living at or below the poverty line, think about that for a moment. 46 million Americans are living at or below the poverty line. 16 million children living in households without adequate access to food. That's 16 million children. And at least 900,000 veterans. Almost 1 million veterans relying on food stamps. Despite that, enormous sums continue to be doled out for presidential vacations. Obama's $16 million for trips to Africa and Hawaii. What about the overtime fraud at the Department of Homeland Security? How many people know about that? There was nearly $9 million in improper overtime claims, and that's just in 6 of the DHS's many offices. Hollywood movie productions. Did you know that $10 million was spent by the Army National Guard on the Superman movie? The tie-ins aimed at increasing awareness about the National Guard. $10 million. In light of the facts, in light of the 16 million children living in households without adequate access to food, and the nearly 1 million veterans relying on food stamps, this is what our government, this regime, and its leaders, our leaders, this is how they're choosing to spend their money. I should note as well that almost 13,000 agencies in all 50 states, and even our U.S. territories, they participate in military recycling program, which means that the surplus military equipment is traded, if you will, and weaponry is gifted each year. And that number continues to get greater. You know, it's funny because the relationship between the citizens of a country and their government, it's pretty fragile when you look at it. Take a look at history. Unfortunately for the American people, the contract they entered into more than 200 years ago, the U.S. Constitution now I'm referencing, really it's been reduced a little more than a marriage of convenience and fiscal duty, marked by distrust, by lying, by infidelity, hostility, delusionment, paranoia, domestic abuse, if you want to equate it to a marriage. And to add insult to injury, these abuses are being perpetuated by the very government officials entrusted with ensuring our freedom and safety. For those people, in the core listeners of our program know this, but for those people listening who might be new listeners, or for those of you who are attempting to convince others of the state of our union, tell them to take a stroll through your downtown, spend an afternoon at the local mall, or just drive around, or catch a flight somewhere. Pay very careful attention to how you and your fellow citizens are treated by government officials, the very people whose salaries you pay. And take a look at the militarization of police, the tactical gear, the police at the Washington Bridge and other bridges and tunnels in New York City, and at the Federal Reserve and at the New York Stock Exchange. We've got pictures. They're in tactical gear. They're holding assault rifles. Look at the police cruisers. Look at their scanning license plates equipment. Look at the various street corners in D.C. We were just there. Look at the surveillance cameras all over the place tracking our movements. While at the airport, look at what they do to you. I mean, they pat you down. And every time you make a call or send a text message, your communications are being logged. Not just your metadata, that's a lie, but the actual communications are being logged and stored in a government file. And, you know, I'm getting more and more reports of government agents in neighborhoods aggressively questioning people about their neighbors, ostensibly for census purposes. Any of you out there have had that happen? Anyway, what we're seeing here is the transformation of the government, I should say, and the police agencies into a hyper-militarized, very, very twitchy, easily offended, very suspicious, locked down, paranoid, all-seeing bureaucracy. But this is all being sold to the American public as an unavoidable means of preventing terrorism and maintaining national security. What we're dealing with is a police state disguised as this benevolent democracy. A runaway government hyped up on its own power and afraid of its citizenry. You see, why are they doing this? Because they're afraid of us. And they damn well better be. Because we do represent a threat to those people in power. As the exposures to what is taking place, as the exposure becomes more widespread, there will be a revolt by the people that are under the thumb of oppression. Yes, the elite are, in fact, attempting to protect themselves from the growing list of people who are outraged and upset. You know, when you consider, for example, the growing list of opinions and activities which may make a federal agent or local police officer think you're a terrorist or sympathetic to terrorist activities. So, I mean, if you advocate for states' rights, for example, if you're a so-called conspiracy theorist, if you're even concerned about the role of FEMA or the alleged FEMA camps, or if you're opposed to the war doctrine, or if you organize for economic justice, or if you show an expression of frustration with mainstream ideologies, if you show opposition or voice opposition to globalization, if you question ammunition stockpiling, well, you know you're a terrorist. Or at least that according to this current out-of-control regime. By the time you throw in the mix a variety of military police training exercises, Jade Helm 15, you start talking about that, ostensibly to train our military to deal with threats overseas. Well, it becomes that much harder to answer no when asked to consider whether we, the people, have become the enemies of our own government, doesn't it? Well, why is this taking place? When did we go off the rails? Who or what is responsible for our slide into tyranny? A lot of people ask this. And this is why we address this. This is why we have guests like Paul McGuire on. And the people who delve deep into this subject, because this is not this subject, contrary to many people's belief, this is orchestrated at the highest levels of the global elite and handed down to the current regime and the current people in power. This is why this is why the TPA passed the House today. This is also why Obamacare was decided to be a tax by the Supreme Court. And chances are, although no decision has been made yet, and I believe in the power of prayer, or we wouldn't have made a 6.5-hour drive from our studios to Washington, D.C. to take part in the solemn assembly. Coach Dave Dobmeyer, saltandlightbrigade.org. This is why chances are the Supreme Court is going to attempt to redefine marriage. But we, the people, have become largely, most of us, well, not the listeners of this program, but most people have become so gullible, so easily distracted by the trinkets and the shiny little objects. We're like kids. The iPhone. What's the newest iPhone out? Gotta have it. Can't live without it. But we've ignored the warning signs all around us. And we are ignoring the warning signs all around us. That maybe describes your neighbor, your friend, your coworker, your family member, your son, your daughter, your mother, your father, your uncle, your niece, nephew, whatever. I can guarantee you know someone like that who is so oblivious to what's taking place. Oh, yes, Charleston. I heard about that terrible tragedy. Boy, that kid must have been really crazy. Isn't it interesting, speaking of Charleston, that you have a 21-year-old male. The venue was a Christian church. And the victims were black. Can you ask for anything better than that in terms of exploitation? Christians and blacks victimized by a white gunman. You don't think for one moment that let's just say for 1 second here that this was purely what it was, nothing more, nothing less, just some 21-year-old sad sack of evil going into a black church because of his warped thoughts, nothing more, nothing less, and wantonly killing people, killing black Christians. The exploitation of this event, you could not have asked for anything better than if you were a globalist planning to take away your guns, to cause a race war or exacerbate an already existing race issue, and also to persecute the Christians in this country and make a case for really outlawing the monotheistic religions. You could not have asked for a better incident to take place if you were that evil. You've got to look at the bigger picture. And you know, we don't have to be meteorologists ourselves, do we? To go outside and to say, hey, man, the skies are looking pretty black and the storm clouds are gathering and it looks like it's going to be, this is tornado weather and we're in the tornado area. We don't have to be meteorologists or have qualifications as a meteorologist to understand that bad things are about to happen in the sky. It's the same with our freedoms. It's the same with what's going on. The warning signs are everywhere. They're staring us right in our faces. But your neighbors and friends, family, many just they're unaware of this. They're all too content to attend look, I know you're busy. I know they're busy. I know that you got to work for a living, and you're tired when you get home. But that's by design. It was set up that way. I once had a friend tell me asked me if I had a job, and at the time I said, yeah. So he said, do you know what job stands for? Or do you know what job is short for? And I just looked at him like, job short for, what? Jackass of the boss was his reply. And at the time I just thought, yeah, okay. But as we look at how we are structured and really made to work not just 8 hours a day, but 10, 12, 14 hours a day, 2 jobs, just to pay taxes, the taxes on their property, just to live. This is all by design. And people can't understand the huge aspect of this. Now, I know to some of you this might seem like old news or very rudimentary information. But it's good for new listeners and for people. It's good, I think, to really lay out the groundwork and to reinforce the groundwork here, because we have to understand how deep this conditioning the process is gone. When you, in so doing, you can then better understand when Paul McGuire talks about Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, Ray Bradbury, Philip Dick, and filmmakers such as Stanley Kubrick, John Carpenter. They've been predicting our present state of affairs for years. They saw the lockdown coming. They saw this coming. They predicted that freedom would fall and how it would fall. Was that just a lucky guess? I don't think so. What did they know? What information were they given? Or perhaps better stated, what information were they told to disseminate to the public to condition us to accept where we're at? You know, if you look back and look at the literary and cinematic prophets, as I'll call them, very accurate. 1932, Huxley's Brave New World, again, is citing now Paul McGuire, as he prophesied. Well, he prophesied mood-enhancing drugs, genetic engineering, and also spoke of the pharmaceuticals that would cause violence. And yesterday, it appears that we saw just that. Some drug-induced pharmaceutical-related violence, at least as a causative or contributing factor to the Charleston shooting. But you're not going to hear about that. You see, what you're going to hear about is how this Dylan Roof was connected to white supremacist organizations. That's what you're going to be hearing about. You're going to be hearing about the ability of this 21-year-old perpetrator to access weapons despite a felonious record, and the need for changes to be made in the law to prohibit this from ever taking place again. The pharmaceutical issue will not be addressed. The white supremacist issue will. But you know, again, Paul McGuire speaks about Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. That came out in 1948. He envisioned a world in which people were tuned into TVs and tuned out to each other. What do we have today? iPods, cell phones, earbuds. And here we sit with cans on our ears, basically, today, Joe and I. But Orwell's 1984, also in 1948, warned against a world in which the government spies on its citizens. What do we see today? We see that in spades and more. It would take us, well, less than 60 years, or about 60 years, to prove that he was right. The question, I suppose, is how do you get a nation to readily accept a police state? How do you persuade the majority of the people today to accept the metal detectors and pat-downs in their schools and bag searches as you go into the mall or into metro stations or stadiums? And how do you get people to accept tanks and military weaponry used by their small-town police forces? How do you get people to accept surveillance cameras on their traffic lights and plate readers and police strip searches on public roadways without so much as a peep? How does that happen? How about the unwarranted enforced blood draws at drunk driving checkpoints? The whole body scanners in airports. You've got businessmen, dignified businessmen, traveling every single day, allowing their wives to be raped, essentially, assaulted without saying a word at airports, and government agents monitoring their communications. If you would try to ram that down the throats of the American people, if you had tried that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there would have been a rebellion. But what you have to do, or what has been done, is you bombard the American populace with constant reports of terrorist activities, of shootings, of bomb threats in malls and schools and sports arenas, and you desensitize them with a steady diet of police violence. You mesmerize them with entertainment spectacles where, look back as the Romans used to refer to what they used to refer to as bread and circus. The distractions and electronic devices, while selling the whole package to them as being in their best interests. And when leaders like Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and let me say this too, John Lennon, you heard me right, John Lennon of the Beatles fame, and when others rise up and say, hey, wait a minute, this is all part of this government elite, this orchestration, what happens to them? Did you notice I threw in John Lennon there? I really want you to take note of that. You know what happened to Kennedy. You know what happened to Martin Luther King and others. But do you really know what happened to John Lennon? And does it matter? Yes, it does matter. But that's a subject of another program. Government agents carry out surveillance. Government agents carry out intimidation, threats, and in some cases, people are exterminated. And you might say that's all just baloney, you're just full of it. Well, the government knows that very few will take the place of those who are acting as watchmen. And likewise, when government whistleblowers lacking followers or name recognition, when they rise up and shine a spotlight on government's misdeeds, they're labeled as traitors. They're isolated from their friends and loved ones and made examples of. This is what happens to those who dare challenge the police state. Plain and simple. We are the enemy. We are the enemy to the regime, this oppressive, tyrannical, Marxist regime. The outlook for our civil liberties, it's growing bleaker every day. The incident in Charlotte, guarantee you, is going to exponentially, it's going to act as a force multiplier in three areas. One is going to be gun control, gun confiscation, basically. Count on it. The second, this is going to exacerbate race issues, and you're going to see race baiting taking place everywhere, all across the country. And it's all going to be done in front of a population who's oblivious to the fact that they're being gamed. Trust me when I say that what happened in Charleston yesterday is a hinge moment. It's one of those hinge moments that will have multiple consequences. And whether or not you believe it was orchestrated, whether or not you believe it was a Manchurian candidate kind of a situation, it doesn't matter. When it's all said and done, what matters is, at the end of the day, where will we find ourselves? I mean, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. It does matter, but what really should be the focus is, what will we allow as American population to be done to us because of this one incident? And you can see the posturing already. You can see the posturing of Obama, Al Sharpton. Why isn't he in jail? Anyway, tax for these tax issues. But you can see it already taking place. For those with eyes to see, you can see what's taking place right now. The massaging of the facts and the exploitation of the issue. A state of martial law is not. I mean, we've seen martial law in 2013 with the Boston Marathon bombing. The Constitution was suspended in Boston, and most people have no clue. From Boston to Ferguson, now to Charleston, we're seeing an exponential increase in hinge moments and hinge points in history. We're going to have much more on this in writing, in reports on our website, Hagmann.com, but we must take note of the dismal state of our freedoms. What author Tom Clancy, I'll just as I close here, I'm just going to quote from Tom Clancy: "What the government is good at is collecting taxes, taking away your freedoms, and killing people. It's not good at much else." That by author Tom Clancy. More on the other side. Doug Hagmann, Hagmann and Hagmann Report, on this, the 18th day of June 2015. Fascism, American style, America the battlefield, and what's about to come our way this summer. What's already been employed, the banality of evil within this totalitarian regime.
Ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of this Thursday, June 18th, 2015 edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Good first hour. I know my dad put a lot of work into research and to put that together, and you presented it very well. And I didn't want to interrupt you while you were speaking, but before we get into the some other news, the timing of this shooting and the subsequent passing of this TPA under the radar. I've been looking on certain websites. I have been listening to the radio off and on throughout the day, the mainstream news media, and I haven't heard much about this at all.
That's because of if it bleeds, it leads, right?
It's been all about the shooting. And that is, and not everything is a conspiracy, but isn't it, we talked about this in the past, when the birth certificate issue was out in the spotlight, Donald Trump held a press conference. It was interrupted by an announcrument that Obama had taken out Osama bin Laden.
Good point.
There are other, Rumsfeld announcing $2.1 trillion missing from the Pentagon. The next day, 9/11 happens. There are events that seem not to be connected, but when you look at the news headlines as a whole and what's going on in the world and the agenda that's being implemented, and you have I don't want to say this is a distraction, but when you have a big story that takes away from what was being covered, like the TPA, how the House voted it down, and they were going to reconvene a vote for, Tuesday? And then they changed it to Thursday.
We went to the 30th, and now it came back where they voted on it today.
Yeah, so now we see, I do see now on Fox News, this must have just been put up not too long ago, House okays Obama trade agenda on second try. Bill heads to Senate. The House on Thursday approved a key plank of the president's trade agenda after the push nearly imploded amid Democratic resistance last week, sending the bill to the Senate, where it still faces an uncertain fate. Yeah, they already passed it. 218 to 208 was the vote. Nevertheless, marked a significant victory for Obama and his pro-trade supporters in both parties. The vote came after Obama huddled Wednesday evening with congressional allies to craft a way forward. The bill would specifically give the president so-called the fast-track authority, which we've heard so much about, to approve trade deals, which Obama wants to seal a 12-nation pact involving Japan and 11 other countries bordering the Pacific Ocean. Now,
90%, by the way,
this
of
is
the world's economy.
I don't have this all put together, but we're going to give a brief summary of how and why this is important when it has absolutely nothing to do with trade. And there's a few listeners that have sent us emails asking if we've read these documents, the Millennium Development Goals of the UN and the post-2015 United Nations Development Agenda.
Right.
Okay, so we have those two documents.
Exciting reading, by the way.
Oh, my goodness. We have the President's National Strategy for Biosurveillance Plan that he put out in July of 2012. We have the Department of Health and Human Services teaming up with the World Health Organization and World Bank monitoring progress towards universal health coverage at a country and global level framework.
Please listen to what Joe is saying, because...
And you also have the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States Department of Health and Human Services and the European Commission on cooperation surrounding health-related information and communication technologies. Huh. Now, let's start here with this document. Now, folks, if you want to find this document, all you have to do, and I don't believe it has a special number, just search... Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. HHS and the European Commission surrounding health-related and communication technologies. And I'll post that in the chat later. It opens by saying the United States Department of Health and Human Services, represented by Secretaries of Health and Human Services Kathleen Syllabus, and the European Commission, represented by its Vice President Nelly Kroes, recognize the importance of health-related information and communication technologies, or e-health or health IT, in promoting individual and community health while fostering innovation and economic growth. They go on to say that they wish to facilitate more effective use of health-related information and communication technologies in healthcare delivery, including disease prevention and health promotion services, intended to strengthen their relationship and support global cooperation in the area of health-related information and communication technologies. The overreaching goal of health IT is to support health of the population, including healthy aging, healthcare, innovation activities. Such activities would include effective universal provision of electronic prescribing and clinical decision support, as well as to enhance the capacity of health IT to support and advance other critically important health-related activities such as clinical research. This memorandum outlines an approach to foster a mutual understanding, if challenged by both sides, in advancing the effective use of health IT. The memo also is in accordance with the following general objectives and principles. 1. The Memorandum of Understanding on topics directly pertaining to the use and advancement of health IT in pursuit of improved health and healthcare delivery services, as well as economic growth and innovation. It will undertake the basic mutual benefits intended to support and strengthen relationships, establishing as well as facilitating new relationships in areas of mutual interest. It will strengthen existing linkages between the Department of Health and Human Services and the European Commission for the following areas. It says, discuss development of how global conceptual framework and health-related information communication technology support can improve health. This framework is also expected to address the assessment of economic benefits of health IT. What they see as challenges, shared goals, and mutual benefits. They have a shared understanding in these areas, and the actions are going to be on the basis for a future international cooperation. The development of internationally recognized and utilized interoperability standards, implementation specifications for electronic health record systems that meet standards for security and privacy protection. The potential activities foreseen in the framework of this memorandum include the following: exchange of information, ongoing activities that are carried out by HHS and the EC relevant to the goals at hand.
Globally.
What they would do is exchange real-time information, also real-time health information, as well as economic and technical reports. They will, the European Council has an e-health governance initiative, which the HHS will endorse. They're going to establish joint working groups to identify strategies for achieving goals, which would at previous point selected with the endorsement of this memorandum. They're going to use scientific conferences, workshops, organized media, and all activities applicable to law and regulations to get this into effect. The memorandum does not constitute an international agreement, but does not create any rights or international law. Okay, so that's one agreement. Why is that important?
That's a backdrop, or
yeah, that's
a component of the groundwork for the TPP.
The meat is so much more. The United Nations post 2015 United Nations Developmental Agenda. They say by September in this year, 2015, member states of the United Nations will have negotiated a set of sustainable development goals, subsidiary targets, and indicators.
And by the way, enter the Pope now. Just keep that in the back of your mind. The Pope coming to
the Pope, the climate change.
Right. Go ahead, sir. You were kind enough not to interject anything when I was talking, so I just want to make sure that the Vatican aspect wasn't lost on people.
And feel free to jump in at any time. They say here that the United Nations will negotiate a set of sustainable development goals. The goals will frame a new international development agenda to replace the Millennium Developmental Goals, which expire in the end of 2015. They go on to state that today, as many people are migrating from one country to another due to unrest, inequality, economic inequality, poverty, labor markets. In anticipation, the UN Development Agenda post-2015 sets clear targets, mobilizing global action to improve the quality of the mitigation process. It goes on to talk about the benefits, looking at different areas of the world, the Asia-Pacific region, how mitigation can be integrated into their post-2015 developmental agenda. And the brief highlights the following three areas require specific attention. 1, fostering partnerships to promote development. Promoting and protecting migrant rights and well-being, reducing costs and risks of human mobility. Now, they get into the actual, they start talking about trade here shortly. But they say that this has a target date of 2015, and it's been agreed upon by all member states. The goals that have been met, and stopping extreme poverty, primarily in schools, rolling back the AIDS epidemic, which were part of the Millennium Development Goals. But they have new goals also. Global consolidations is what a new goal. It's a main characteristic we can expect to see on a global development agenda. Judging from the ongoing debate, it seems several new points will be acknowledged. The terms developed and developing used to describe countries are becoming less relevant. Instead, the new agenda will likely highlight the interdependence between global north and south. There's a need to address inequalities between and within countries, leaving no one behind. Development assistance has diversified beyond governments to include private sector, private foundations, and alternative source financing. Partnerships to promote development are key and may include public-private financing, South-South cooperation, and triangular cooperation.
By the way, you're going to hear more. The triangular cooperation is a phrase you're going to be hearing more about.
Yeah, and then they go on, I'm not going to go through the whole document, but they go on to state some of their relevant work in the past through international conferences, starting at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, where they laid out Agenda 21. And right after that, what year was NAFTA implemented?
1993.
1993, okay. Well, they say here that in 1995, after an orderly international legislative agenda had taken place, there was a new international community, and they had begun to meet as an international community in addressing some of the root main concerns of these new nations. First of all is who participates, who are the stakeholders, what dynamics for the population and development are needed and for human rights. They go on to state that mitigation is what they would say is prevention. And they have in their lexicons here, pre-market surveillance and post-market surveillance are very commonly used words, which I don't like these words. The pre-market notification or surveillance and post-market notification or post-market surveillance. The post-market surveillance is having a chip inside you emitting real-time health information that is then picked up by a healthcare professional in the United States, and it is shared globally to all the partners. Well, the reason the trade is so important for this, the UN had put out, well, the President put out an executive order promoting international regulatory cooperation. This is May 1st of 2012. And this policy...
May Day.
Yeah,
Note the date.
Absolutely. What they're doing here, and they say the policy, this is improving regulation and regulatory review, a system to promote and protect public health, welfare, safety, and the environment while promoting economic growth, competitiveness, and job creation in an increasingly global economy and international regulatory cooperation. Consistent with domestic law, prerogatives and U.S. trade policy can be important means of promoting the goals of this executive order. Now we're seeing this trade policy, the other half of it, come through. The regulatory approaches taken by foreign governments differ by those taken by U.S. regulatory agencies. And it goes on to list a number of differences, but they say here are the shared challenges. They involve health, safety, security, environmental, intergovernmental regulatory cooperation. And they identify approaches that are at least as protective as those that the world would adopt in the absence of such cooperation. And international regulatory cooperation will reduce, eliminate, prevent unnecessary differences in requirements. They want to coordinate this international regulatory cooperation to serve as a forum to discuss and develop a common understanding among the U.S. government and other countries to support significant cross-cutting cooperation activities such as the work of regulatory cooperation councils, the promotion of good practices as well as good trade approaches. They go on to say that their strategies for developing this regulatory approaches would be emerging technology. They say the best practices for this emerging technology should be taken by the head of the UN and the World Health or the World Trade Organization and World Bank, which is where we pick up here. As I said, the World Bank put out a paper on December 2013 monitoring progress towards universal health coverage at a country and global framework level. And to do this, they say that there is a growing movement for universal health coverage, ensuring everyone who needs health services will get them. The push for UHC, or universal health coverage, is one of the goals of the post-2015 developmental agenda. And this paper is developed by the World Health Organization, the World Bank, and this is a framework, a common framework among nations for monitoring progress towards universal health coverage. They say this common framework and the universal health coverage will encompass all people, whether for health services, whether for prevention, promotion, treatment, rehabilitation, or palliative. They will cover the costs, the government or the international regulators, but they have points of focus, very important points of focus. This is a global goal. They say that an emerging consensus in the post-25 agenda should address the unfinished agenda of health-related Millennium Development Goals, or the emerging burden of chronic conditions and injuries, existing health indicators, and health-related immunization and other therapeutic priority interventions related to non-communicable diseases. The universal health coverage will monitor the social environment and determine the health and sustainable development on a nation basis. So they go into considerations, what they need to do, blah, blah, blah. Framework is laid out in a chart. They start by saying what is needed to be done. They have 4 sections here. They have promotion, prevention, treatment, and care, and that is on the left side. And then this has to do with communicable diseases, sick people. Then on the right side, healthy people who are disease-free. They also have the promotion and prevention and treatment and care. Now, the points here differ. So what they're going to do is anybody who has any type of disease, they will be as I said before, the pilot programs. The pilot programs are very big, as this is how they're going to begin to roll this out. And they have this in the latest amendment of the Social Security Act, where they talk about this, that anything from long-term hospital care to in-home health care, as well as, and they go through the definitions. This is for the purpose of the section, post-acute care provider. The terms post-acute care provider means a home health agency, a skilled nursing facility, and inpatient rehabilitation facility. And they go through all these different classifications for what they determine to be patient statuses. Now, without bogging everybody down with the details, which we can do at a later date when I have them isolated, everybody falls into one of these categories, because even if you're not sick, they still want the mitigation factor for the in case of emergency use. They want remember we talked about the standardization the other day? Well, this is what they do. Standardization patient data. And it says no later than October 1st, 2018, and it goes and cites a bunch of laws. The Secretary will require, through the provisions, a standardized patient assessment data. The data will be administered on an individual level. The standardized patient assessment data described for purposes in this paragraph describe 1, the functional status, mobility, self-care, cognitive function is 2, special services is 3, like dialysis, chemotherapy, etc. Medical conditions is 4, implants is 5. And they also mention
this is interwoven into ultimately this is a backbone for the TPP.
Yeah, and I'll get to that. But the document I'm reading from now, which everybody should take a look at, it is easily accessible. It's the Social Security latest amendment to the Social Security Act, and it is called. I have so many papers on my desk. Okay. Improving Medicare Post-Acute Care Transformation Act of 2014, H.R. 4994, passed in 2014. It's to amend Title 18 of the Social Security Act to provide for standardized post-acute care assessment data for quality payment, discharge planning, and for other purposes. They say if enacted, it would transform the Social Security Act, and it would implement new standardized post-acute care assessment planning for discharge to inpatient. And they would require data described in subparagraph A, which is the standardized assessment data, to be issued by providers implemented by the government for information, not only for our government and healthcare providers, but for foreign governments and also for stakeholders, foreign stakeholders. Now, this is where we get to the TPP. What is the TPP and who is it made up of? The TPP is a international trade organization that is going to encompass countries and businesses or corporations. When one is incorporated, you have no personal liability.
Right.
A corporation is just like a business, only it is a corporation because it has that clause that gives you special tax benefits, and it shields you from personal liability if your business fails. Well, all this is done through a corporation. The United States is technically, by definition, a corporation.
And many people don't understand that.
Yeah, and it would probably be a good time to go into detail and explain it. But the United States is a corporation. The United States and America are two different things. The District of Columbia and the United States of America are two different things. And this is why Jesus spoke out against lawyers so much. Because what they do is they manipulate words. They change the meanings. They have multiple meanings for the same words. And they are used to, like Babel. The language had to be confounded because everybody spoke the same language and they all thought nothing but evil continually and nothing could be held from their will. So the Lord confounded their language and spread them back across the earth. This was when Nimrod was attempting to build the Tower of Babel. So we have three things here. We have one, emergency management. FEMA, Department of Homeland Security, and the President's National Strategy for Biosurveillance. Two, we have the United Nations and the post-2015 agenda, the World Health Organization and the World Bank, IMF. And then we have the countries who are involved in the TPP. As we talked about many times, the TPP is not necessarily have anything to do with trade. It has so much to do with things not pertaining to trade. Intellectual property rights, environmental clauses, health care clauses. And we haven't even read the bill yet. This is just what some of it has been leaked. But what they're doing, to make it real, to cut this short, is they have and are creating and have created a consolidated system, or a framework, I should say. Not really a system. It's not that identifiable yet. But they have put the infrastructure in place, the laws in place through executive orders, through implementing law through the Federal Register that does not have to be passed on top of other laws like Obamacare. They have created the law where you will have to have a RFID chip implanted in you for patient health information and identification.
And also, we can take it one step further. When we talk about the chip, it will also contain your personal data, and it will ostensibly protect you from your identity from being stolen. And that's the economic side of this. That's just.
Yeah, I wish I had the one law with me because it has the diagrams in here.
If I can interject this at this point here, just very quickly, what you're seeing today with the TPP. You've got to go. You really have to understand NAFTA. You asked me about NAFTA. You really have to understand that the North American Free Trade Agreement was a project of the Committee of 300. Now, we talked about the Committee of 300 on Friday and Monday, citing heavily from the work of John Coleman. But you have to understand that this was a natural extension of the War on American Industry and Agriculture set out in the Club of Rome's 1969 Post-Industrial Zero Growth Position Papers. As we stated, this is overseen by then Secretary of State Cyrus Vance and a team of One World government scientists. Let me just interject a few more things here, and then I'll give it back to you real quick here.
Okay.
Because what we're seeing with the TPP is absolutely, nearly identical to NAFTA. Okay. As a matter of fact, now listen to this. When you look at NAFTA, you have to look at what began, where it started. Well, the pro-NAFTA forces began moving in the early 80s, targeting the Clinton transition team. Most notably, Sandy Berger and Barry Carter and various other people. They actually held meetings in Texas on January 9th before Clinton actually moved into the White House. So the reason I brought that up is because you can see that the groundwork was being laid by the government before the new president was sworn into office. And you note about the TPA, people like Ted Cruz saying, this will hold the president accountable. But another thing, too, is this will benefit the next president. But anyway, really quick, too, here. The NAFTA. Did you know, folks, that the agreement itself was placed under the umbrella of the National Security Agency? In other words, people were not allowed to see the terms of NAFTA because it was placed under NSA, National Security Agency wraps. Isn't that what's going on here? You can't see the TPP? Well, of course. And I'll say this: if you look at what happened with NAFTA, you go back even further. 1945, when the UN treaty, when the United States was ratified the UN treaty. What happened in 1945? Only 5 senators actually read the UN treaty before voting on it. Only 5. That was gross violation of the U.S. Constitution, which holds that all treaties must be read and fully debated before being brought to a vote. And one of the ploys, and we're seeing this play out today, one of the ploys the NAFTA proponents used, and this is a key tactic, you're seeing it play out today, this is why the confusion with the odd bedfellows here. One of the key ploys of NAFTA, what they did was they used the old trick of putting up a person who ostensibly would speak out strongly against NAFTA. Think about this. Somebody speaking out strongly against TPP. Such a person would appear to have all of the answers why NAFTA should not pass. In reality, this person would be in the enemy's camp. That's the way it works. This expert is then strongly discredited. All or nearly all of his or her conclusions are proven wrong as planned, so that the pro-NAFTA forces could say, you see just how wrong that person was? Well, insert TPP where I just had NAFTA. And that's exactly what's taking place today with the TPP. And if you look very quickly at NAFTA and compare it to what's going on, you go back in history, 99.9% of the House members did not read NAFTA.
Didn't vote on it.
Well, yeah, 2,000 pages of the agreement. Yeah, there was. So talk about dereliction of duty. It was just incredible. But that should tell us something. We're seeing. There's nothing new under the sun. What happened with NAFTA, what happened with the UN treaty, is happening right now today with the TPP. The reason it works, the tactics work. And go back even further. The NAFTA agreement was just another step along the road to socializing America's trade. And if you trace it back even further, look up the meetings in Havana, Cuba, on March 24th, 1948, under the auspices of creating a United Nations, a one world government, a group of one world government supporters met to hammer out a globalist agreement that came to be known as the International Trade Organization, or ITO. But the ITO was not acceptable to those people paying attention in Congress, and the ITO was basically sidelined, but it didn't die. Think about what's going on. By the way, it was later given new life under the title of the GATT, the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. So you see how the TPP is following exactly the NAFTA, well, almost exactly the NAFTA plan, and also it's an extension of NAFTA by its very core, socialist in nature, and it's going to destroy this country's middle class and whatever's left of its industry and leave us destitute.
All right, so you ready for this?
Go.
Okay. This is stuff I have not shared with you yet.
Okay, I'm buckled in.
I'll have to email all this to you. Okay, we have under the World Health Organization, I posted this link in the chat. Universal health coverage. A global coalition calls for acceleration of access to universal coverage. A new global coalition of more than 500 leading health development organizations worldwide, from governments to NGOs, are accelerating reforms to ensure everyone everywhere can access quality services without being forced into poverty. Now it goes on to talk about they're accelerating this access to universal health coverage. What is tracking universal health coverage? What is universal health coverage, etc. Health information technology involves the exchange of health information in an electronic environment. Widespread use of health IT within the healthcare industry will improve the quality of healthcare, prevent medical errors, reduce costs, increase administrative effectiveness, and decrease paperwork, and expand access to affordable healthcare. It is imperative that the privacy and security of the electronic health information be ensured as the information is maintained and transmitted. Now, HIPAA changed their laws recently. You used to be protected under the HIPAA laws, where your health information was more secret than the NSA's spy records.
That's right.
Not so much anymore. HIPAA privacy rule has been changed. It's 45 CFR 164. The HIPAA privacy rule recognizes legitimate need for public health authorities and other responsible for ensuring public health and safety to have access to protected health information to carry out their public health mission. The rule recognizes that the public health reports may be made by covered entities are important means of identifying threats to health and safety of the public at large, as well as individuals. The rule permits covered entities to disclose protected health information without authorization for a specific public health purpose. In addition, covered entities engages a business associate to assist in specific health activity, and in the associate's written agreement, the covered entity should identify these activities, and business associates may make the disclosure for public health reasons in accordance with written agreement. Now, general public health activities, they say. The privacy rule permits covered entities to disclose protected health information without authorization to public health authorities who are legally authorized to receive such reports for the purpose of preventing or controlling disease or injury. This would include, for example, a reporting of a disease or injury, reporting vital events such as births or deaths, and conducting public health surveillance, investigations, or interventions. Also, covered entities may, at the direction of a public health authority, disclose any protected health information to a foreign government agency that is acting in collaboration with the public health authority. Covered entities who are also a public health authority may use as well as disclose protected health information for these public purposes. Now, here is what definitions are. The public health authority is an agency or authority of the U.S. government, a state or a territory, a political subdivision of a state or territory, an Indian tribe, or one that is responsible for public health matters in their official mandate, as well as a person or entity acting under a grant of authority from or under a contract with a public health agency.
Huh?
Goodness. Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay, so it goes on to say that generally the covered entities are required to reasonably limit the protected health information disclosed for public purposes. However, covered entities are not required to make minimum necessary determination for public health disclosures pursuant to an individual's authorization required by law.
But some people might ask, Joe, we're talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the trade agreement. What are we talking about health so much here?
This is here I have.
Where's the connection?
I have it right here.
Okay.
This is Trans-Pacific Partnership Secret Surrender of Sovereignty. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it goes through the history of NAFTA.
Right.
And it talks about the TPP will be the biggest, it'll be NAFTA on steroids.
Right.
It'll be it will be boosting trade across Asia Pacific, encouraging regional trade integration. Also, it will undergo a requisite review of domestic trade policies. Canada will join the pact along with 11 nations. Australia, no surprises here. The group of nations is a working establishment of a comprehensive free trade across the region. Of course, as was the case with NAFTA, trade conducted under these multinational agreements is never free of government control. Globalist bureaucrats who are unaccountable and unelected to the American people would establish domestic trade policies in all nations, including the U.S. They talk about inviting Canada to the TPP negotiations is a unique opportunity for the United States to build its already dynamic trade partnership. Through TPP, we're bringing relationships with our largest trading partner to the 21st century. We look to continue consolidations with Congress and domestic stakeholders regarding Canada's entry into the TPP as we move closer to a board-based, high-standard trade agreement in the Asian-Pacific region. Now, these new trade agreements are more than trade. The trade agreements will place domestic U.S. firms that do not do business overseas at a corporate disadvantage. They will put foreign firms under the trade pact, would conceivably appeal federal regulatory court rulings against them to international tribunals with the authority to overrule sovereignty of the United States or the businesses in America. If foreign companies want to do business in America, they should have to follow the same rules as everyone else. But these will not be the way of the entering into the free trade agreement. They're exempt from our own environmental, financial regulations, and they have a cheaper cost of business, and the burdensome of rules and regulations are not there, making it cheaper for them to do business. Now, these trade pacts, like NAFTA and GATT before, strike the heart of our national sovereignty. They are at their core, they diminish prerogatives and powers of a specific country and surrender them to international bodies or corporations. This is giving them keys to the kingdom and locking out the lawmakers, which is Congress. Now, what are in these?
I just want to say this, Bonnier, for what it's worth, when you're talking about Congress, he's one of the worst speakers of the House this nation has ever seen. Folks, that he refused to allow conservatives to amend this trade deal. But what he did do was allow Democrats to amend the legislation. Now, the reason I bring up the conservatives and Democrats in name only, if you follow the bouncing ball, it's that group of globalists that he is corralling here. So it's all about globalization under Bonnier, under Obama, under this one group. It has nothing to do with Republicans and Democrats, conservatives, or liberals. It's all about the global elite. And Bonnier is, in fact, or Boehner, however you want to pronounce his name, is part and parcel to this in the congressional aspect of this, as Joe just mentioned.
Yeah, and this TPP will, among other things, it will block certain domestic stakeholders from doing business. They will, the United States would agree to exempt foreign corporations from our laws, placing resolution at the dispute of international arbitration tribunals overseen by the United Nations. It is more than a trade agreement. It is a pact. It is the most ambitious free trade agreement in the world. It is an integration and a consolidation of nations and corporations rather than a partnership of governments. They go on to state here, it is anything but trade. It deals with internet freedom being surrendered, intellectual property rights being surrendered.
Critically important property rights.
Current U.S. law, specifically the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, would be supplemented by TPP Article 16.3. This provision of the TPP draft document paves the way for new copyright enforcement schemes extending far beyond the current limits imposed by the DMCA. It contains mandates more expansive than those proposed by anti-counterfeiting trade agreements. Using rational copyright protection, it would regulate Internet and create a new governmental entity for that purpose, ACTA, per se. Also,
this is subjugation of the Internet to international bodies, is what, very clearly is what's taking place under the TPP.
Apart from the issues of sovereignty, the Internet freedom is on the chopping block. The Internet that we know today the good work of the ISPs created the Internet we know today, and they're making it at a much lower cost. In a post-TPP world, ISPs would be forced to raise prices dramatically in order to increase in their own overhead brought on by the requirement that they monitor and manage all websites that they host. Alternatively, there would undoubtedly be a larger number of ISPs due to the burden of being forced into the role of Internet police and expanding the Internet access to all before outweighing the benefits. Now, the Electronic Frontier Foundation described the problem that the Internet would face in the U.S. if the TPP was enforced. Private ISP enforcement of copyright poses a threat to free speech on the Internet because it makes offering open platforms for generated user content economically unattainable. For example, on an ad-supported site, the cost of reviewing each post would generally exceed the pennies of revenue one might get from ads. Even obvious fair uses would become too risky to host, leading to an Internet with only cautious and conservative content. It also would bypass the U.S. court system and Constitution, abolishing due process owed to those accused of crimes, whether it's through copyright infringement or some other type of Internet crime. But the national boundaries and domestic legal process would be gutted by the globalists, and the already hanging on by a thread Constitution would just be blown away. This has not only trade and collaboration implications, but it is going to tear down the wall of secrecy built by globalists seeking to shield their attack on the law of liberty away from congressional oversight. And when finished with the TPP integration, economic, political, military will all have been weakened from American sovereignty, they say in this article. This is from 2 years ago. That article was. Now, in a separate article, they talk about how the things would range from food safety. This is what's in the TPP. Food safety, fracking, financial markets, currency manipulation, medical prices, copyright rules, internet freedom, and that's only 5 of the 29 chapters that have been released or leaked. They would surrender American sovereignty laws to international tribunals, and which brings me to my next point. Dad, you're going to remember this. A couple years back, I printed this out and ran through it. Medical device regulations.
Yes.
the Global Harmonization Task Force.
Yes.
It is a World Health Organization agency in which it pertains to medical device safety, governmental regulations on implantable medical devices, Global Harmonization Task Force on implementing the objectives and enforcing the laws of the new standards and policies. It would optimize the regulatory process, and it will draft comprehensive policy and guidelines on medical device management. It will promote compliance. It will do so through rewarding those who decide to join and by punishing those who hold out. The priorities are on an international agenda of regulatory framework for medical device implementation. And this is a huge document, but it goes on to talk about this global village we now live in. They say that everything is going to be interconnected. Everything is under international standards. Communication will be very difficult without international standardizations. Medical devices will be used globally. Safety and performance of the medical devices are important. International public health interests also important. Thus, global harmonization on medical data standards and regulations are critical. Voluntary and mandatory standards. Guys are gonna love this because there's no such thing as voluntary. You have mandatory standards. Voluntary is just another word for mandatory. Voluntary is, I don't have the document with me. The Army released a publication that listed the definitions of many of the tricky words in all these publications that span from agency to agency. But what they say is that if it's going to be mandatory, but you can volunteer not to be a part of it. But you have to be of perfect sound mind, body, and health. They say you have no ability to consent, yes or no, to implanting a medical device in yourself if you have any issues with concentrating, breathing, thinking, walking, talking, hearing, seeing, eating,
it's
you
all
ever reading that, Dan?
Yeah, it's all encompassing. And it's done by design.
They say here, most standards will be voluntary. However, a standard must be mandatory. It has to be mandatory for to be uniform across international standards. But they say the standard mandated by a government or an international trade agreement. Notice international trade agreement. This is from years ago. So they're talking about an international trade agreement being given the authority to implement this as a law established by the governments or contracts between international bodies. And they are going to do this. They say the standards are not human interest, but they're dominated by vested interest and the greater good. They list the conformity with their standards. They say that regulating authorities attest that products and processes conform to a standard by authorizing the display of their certification mark. This is where it gets scary because they start using the word mark.
Yep.
They say that the official national organization will have authority and create a national standard in each country. In the United States of America, the American National Standards Institute, a private nonprofit organization, and they give some Canadian and European agencies, would develop system standards not only to help administer medical device, but also economic developments intertwined with the medical devices. International development agencies realize that a standard infrastructure is a basic requirement for success of an economic policy that will improve productivity, competitiveness, and export capability. Now, they talk about this is International Organization for Standardization, the International Telecommunications Union. It is electronic engineering. It is for information technology, risk management, quality systems, technical committees for management standardization. So you have the patient identification, patient health information, patient economic information, all on under the new law on a little chip called a medical device.
And these are all bits and pieces.
Oh yeah,
that are components to under the umbrella ultimately of the TPP, but it's yeah.
And this is what they talk about. They're going to implement it. Implementing a full regulatory program can be very expansive and demanding, but the Global Harmonization Task Force will tend to use international standards, methods, and procedures relating to government regulations will also be established. What they will do is take full advantage of what others have done in this field as this becomes more out in the public, as they start releasing this. They're not going to promote it as something that is mandatory. They're going to establish a compliance/cooperation program where people are given incentives for signing up or being a part of this. People who are inpatients in hospitals, nursing homes, who have severe health issues will be the first ones to go. Then what they say they'll do is, after the grace period is over, or the probation period, they say that they will, after consulting with the stakeholders, introduce a basic regulatory program, holding educational sessions, and discussing input from stakeholders to the public on issues affecting them and the performance of new medical devices, to be development policy and guidelines for everyone, apart from the rich, they say. And they also say that advertising, this is where it gets strange. If the government has not already passed legislation, this should be done to prohibit misleading or fraudulent advertising of medical devices. Advertising has a powerful influence on people. A prohibition on the misleading, fraudulent advertisement of health devices should be essential legislation. This is of particular importance as people are becoming more health conscious in the development of home use medical devices that are rapidly expanding.
That's right.
They're saying do not allow people to talk about these in a bad way.
Correct. It's actually it's directing the conversation away from, and I know this sounds confusing, but it's directing the conversation away from any type of talk of oppression or subjugation under the various aspects of the health portions of the TPP, and it's difficult. It really is. It's confusing, but you got to understand what Joe's talking about here is part and parcel to the health aspect and the health surveillance aspect of the TPP.
Yeah, they also have, and I'll finish up here. They also have, where is it here? Emergency procedures that are separate from the plans that they have. The emergency situations, preparedness, planning, and response. The privacy rule protects individual identifiable health information for uses and disclosures that unnecessarily compromise the individual's privacy. But it goes on to say the rule is carefully designed to protect public or private health information while allowing important healthcare communities to receive it. It goes on to say they have a plan for protecting health information or planning or responding to emergency situations. It's a civil rights emergency preparedness page by HHS. In this, all bets are off. If there is a declared emergency, if the First Lady's breath is not the right smell, as we saw Obama issue an executive order saying anybody who coughed could be quarantined. Any type of emergency would take all implementation procedures away and automatically make it mandatory.
Correct. And this is going to be, the enforcement will be not ultimately not on a national level, but really on a global level. Ultimately, now
they say
it's
if the president declares an emergency, and the Secretary HHS declares a public emergency, they will waive sanctions and penalties against the covered hospital that does not comply with certain provisions of the privacy rule. It will remain in effect the privacy rule, but a compliance and guidance enforcement statement will be issued, followed by local law enforcement efforts to implement it.
Now, see, you went down really far down the health aspect of this, but it's important because when you pull back, okay, you went down that road pretty far, but the health aspect of this, the health aspect pulls together a lot of the executive actions and orders that we've seen passed.
And it's more than health. It's all your personal. Imagine your
right.
Bank cards, your passports, your driver's license, all on a little chip. Your health information.
That's ultimately what is.
Yes.
And it's going to with via the TPP. And again, you have to think ahead a little bit more. With the TPP, it's information that will be shared not in a national database, although initially it will, but in an international or in databases. There's going to be sharing between. We'll say
you can't see it, but any government corporation, say a Iranian company, wants to look at it. If they're a stakeholder, they have the right to do so.
Correct.
You, whose information it is, don't have the right.
Right, and then so that's the health part of it. The Agenda 21 part of the TPP, which the Pope now, and I'll just mention this: the Pope, we had mentioned he's going to be here in September. He's pushing for this, and of course he publishes encyclical on climate change, and that's very
worshiping Mother Earth.
Right. Now that's going to buttress the. It's going to bring up the other aspects that will be concurrent with. Okay, the Agenda 21 on a global scale is going to be concurrent with the TPP, the trade deal on the global scale. So you've got.
Do you know they have a sustainable HHS, the Sustainable Justice Initiative?
Yeah. Think about that, how messed up that is. But when you look at it, you've got 600 corporations that are feeding into the, roughly 600 corporations that are feeding into the text of the TPP that we're not allowed to see, that the TPA is instrumental in granting the authority, of course, to the chief or the Obama, the renegade, the man in the White House. It's giving him all the power. It's giving him royal powers, basically, like a king, to pass this. And nowhere in the world, nowhere in the history of our country, the president, the man occupying the Oval Office, does not, absolutely not, have the authority to create any treaties, which this is, although people, this is not a treaty. Oh, it most certainly is. Well, the president of the United States cannot make trade agreements, period. Okay? Trade bills, trade falls solely within the jurisdiction of the House of Representatives. President Monroe obviously made that clear way back in the day. The people who we're dealing with right now are attacking not just the country, but the Constitution. They're subverting the Constitution and enabling the one world government to really tighten its grip on the commerce and trade and health and environment and internet and everything inside the United States of America. The repercussions, as Joe had indicated, just the health and the ultimately leading to the mark of the beast in trade and health and identification. This is all being negotiated right now, and at the very tip of the spear is this TPA, which, of course, will be passed. Authority will be granted to Obama to engage this country into the worst usurpation of our sovereignty in the history of our country.
Now, listen to this. This is probably one of the most frightening parts of this whole thing. The HIPAA privacy rule, electronic health information exchange in a network environment. This is called individual choice. It is the nationwide privacy and security framework for electronic exchange of individually identifiable health information. This guidance provides information regarding HIPAA privacy rule as it relates to the individual choice principle in the privacy and security framework. They start out by saying individuals should be provided a reasonable opportunity and capability to make an informed decision about the collection, use, and disclosure of their individually identifiable health information. The individual choice privacy and security framework emphasizes the opportunity and ability of an individual to make choices with respect to the electronic exchange of their information. Now, it goes on to say this: the privacy rule provides them with several rights intended to empower the individual to become more active in managing his or her health information. The right to access certain information, the right to have certain health information amended, the right to receive an accounting of disclosures, the right to receive a covered entity's notice of private practices, the right to agree or object to authorize certain disclosures, the right to request restrictions of certain uses and disclosures. Now, this is where it gets interesting here. They say that the primary purpose for the treatment described in the introduction discuss how the privacy rules provision for optional consent and the right to request restrictions discloses can support and facilitate individual choice with respect to the electronic exchange of health information in a networked environment. Notice they don't say you can opt out, but they go on to say optional consent. The privacy rules optional consent provision offered entities the ability to adopt use and disclosure policies built upon baseline requirements based on one's own professional ethics and judgments. Now, here's where it gets dicey. An individual's right to deny having your health information. The privacy rule provides individuals with the right to request a covered entity restrict uses or disclosures about the individual treatment, payment, or operations or purposes. While entities are not required to agree to the individual's request, there are policies in places to deny or accept such requests. Now, the patient's right, they say that the patient has the right not to accept this emergency treatment or this information technology.
Or very simply stated, you've got a right not to participate in this.
You do. It says the restrictions would naturally extend to electronic health information exchange environments, but what happens when somebody gets hurt? What happens when somebody needs something? It says, as with consent, the privacy rule does not prevent entities from establishing a policy restricting disclosures completely. If basically they say this, if somebody wants to cut themselves off from having this technology implemented inside them, then they run the risk of not being a part of society. They will have no right to any healthcare treatment. They'll have no place in the community. They will have no ability to conduct business. And this is, I'm reading it from HIPAA's own, HHS and his own website.
They're going to cut you off.
Yeah, that's exactly what they say. It requires an individual's authorization to disclose the private health information, but in such cases where people choose not to comply with the electronic policy, the privacy HIPAA authorizes to be obtained electronically from the individuals without any consent. So they can try to, and this doesn't pertain to the mark of the beast because, as we know, they can't force it on you.
Well,
but
go ahead.
Privacy rule allows the individual's consent in order to use or disclose the health information, payment, or healthcare operation purposes. If an entity refuses the content and manner of obtaining the consent, the privacy rule provides individuals the right to does not provide the individual's right for treatment, health care, of operational purposes. They would be on restriction and required to have the policies adapted in place, or their request will be denied. The provisions for consent or right of restrictions to facilitate individual choice with respect to the electronic health information will depend solely on whether one individual wants to subject themselves to it or not. If they choose not to, then they are considered not part of the society.
And if you think you can run from this, what Joe's talking about, a lot of this depends too on surveillance of you, on surveillance of your habits and buying habits. Think about this. This year, mega food corporations are starting to roll out these high-tech shelving units. They're outfitted with cameras. They track your shopping behavior as well as information such as age and sex of the shoppers. Now, okay, considering what Joe just stated was contained within these documents, you've got this massive surveillance system. You've got the FBI's next generation identification, which is NGI, facial recognition system, which is being used today. Okay, but the biometric data is including palm prints, fingerprints, iris scans, facial recognition. All this is being amassed today under the under the auspices of your security. And now, to take it one step further, currently in an $80 billion industry, there are at least 30,000 drones that are set to be flying over the United States by 2020, and that's
not including private drones, Amazon drones.
Right. And devices are being developed that would allow police to stop your vehicle if you run from them, supposedly, or anything else. So you think you're going to get out of this? Oh, and everything we do, as you had mentioned, via the chip, via this RFID, will eventually be connected to the internet. So it's estimated by 2030 there's going to be 100 trillion sensor devices connecting human electronic devices such as cell phones and laptops to the internet, and much, if not all, of our electronic devices are going to be connected to Google. Go figure. So you think you can outsmart the system? We're being forced to a point of no return, pushed into this system of either total surveillance or being off the grid, and you're not allowed to live off the grid. No siree. So, it seems like a very dry, mundane, drolling explanation here of the things of the components of the TPP. But this is why. This should shed light on exactly why the fight is so severe. The fight is so critical for the TPA, and why the lies are so rife and so plentiful, and why the globalists are pushing this so hard, because this is an extension of NAFTA. This is an extension of the WTO. But even worse, this is the final. This is the final play the final move that will subjugate all nations, including the United States, to a one world global authority by the globalists. And how it affects you, they've got you by the healthcare, they've got you by the security aspect of things, they've got you by the commerce, the economic part of things. It should all be clear right now to everyone listening. This is kind of the final wrap up toward the consolidation of power, concentration of power, and concentration and consolidation of information, where everything you do is going to be under this giant surveillance net, and that's why this is all important.
The President issued in 2014 a Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience Month. The essential to our national security and economic growth, America's critical infrastructure, from power plants to pipelines to our hospital and highways, supports the physical and virtual systems that underpin American society. In a changing world, an increased interdependence of our country's most vital resources and networks has created new opportunities for growth and innovation. It has also led to greater risks and vulnerabilities. During Critical Infrastructure Security Resilience Month, we reflect on the important role of our infrastructure and what the role it plays in building a safe and prosperous nation. We recommit to strengthening and protecting the important assets. The security of our nation is the top priority, and my administration is dedicated to preserving and fortifying systems that support our daily lives, guided by a cybersecurity framework. While promoting an open and reliable cyberspace, we are working to protect our critical infrastructure. The face of a diverse set of physical risks to our infrastructure, from extreme weather, impacts of climate change, to health pandemics, accidents, or terrorists, have us taking steps to reduce the public-private partnership to bolster our system and better manage risks. That is why earlier this year we launched the Build America Investment Initiative to improve roads, water systems, electrical grids, and encouraged innovation in financing, increased public-private collaboration in building efficient and secure American infrastructure. Today's interconnected world, we must all remain dedicated to identifying deterring threats and hazards to the nation's infrastructure and to mitigate the consequences that could occur. It goes on to say, this month, let us resolve safeguards and strengthen the systems we rely on every day to support first-class infrastructure and sustain America's role as the world leader, as the leader on the world stage. And that is just part of what he wrote there. But they say they're going to harness new integrated range of threats to modernizing our cyber and physical infrastructure, investing in the 21st century infrastructure, creating jobs that build up the country through this new technological launch that they have. And it's not just extreme weather that they're talking about. What do we need? A interconnected web of Wi-Fi networks and connected cell phones that can map where everybody is, even if you don't have one of these devices. Yet we still need the chip. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the drones. We have so much. The spying, it's just over the top. And then to say, this is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to also have a chip in you that reports back to us your blood pressure, if you're eating right. And we talk about the death panels. We talk about the control of the people's behaviors. They are going to base your health coverage on, well, not us, because we're not going to have this implant inside of us, but people who will are going to be, it's a nanny state at the highest level. It's like being in preschool or being a child again. You're going to be told what you can and can't eat, what you can and can't do, how much you should exercise, what you should subject your mind to or body to. It is a total Orwellian, or even further than that, a totalitarian technological takeover.
One thing that, one bit of research that people can do on their own, I would recommend, because where we're at today is the where we're at today is the result of a number of initiatives, a number of programs that throughout the years have been created and not necessarily have been effectively accomplished in terms of their objectives. For example, Global 2000. There's something called the Global 2000 Plan, and it calls for the diminishing of the population on Earth. And this goes back into the Carter years, okay? And
it depends on how you look at it, though, because through wars.
Well, yeah, but they're saying, look, in this Global 2000 plan, they were saying that they would diminish the population. I think it was drop the world's population by 3 billion people. I think by 2010. Okay, I don't have it in front of me, but It began during the Carter administration. This is how far back all of these things go. It was an 800-page study. It was by the Department of State, the Council on Environmental Quality, okay? And this was a component of which, well, this led up to the Agenda 21, and at least on a national level, and now we see the Vatican going even larger, doubling down and doing this on an international level, combined with the trade aspect of TPP, which also includes property ownership and the control of the biodiversity projects of the globalists. In other words, it's all about sustainable development, not on a national level anymore, but on an international level. And all of these different, seemingly disparate projects, whether from 50 years ago to 40 to 30 to 10 years ago to even 2 years ago to today, from NAFTA to WTO to ITO previous to that, through today, through TPP. They're all working for the same objective. And now we're seeing, and this is the important thing, when we talk about the RFID, you talk about the healthcare. Why was Obamacare, why was it so important for national healthcare, universal healthcare to be passed? Because it was to be a component of, a part and parcel to the larger global governance. It had to be, you have to have control, federal control over the health in order to have international control and consolidation, because you can't have a whole bunch of smaller entities controlling your healthcare when in fact the national healthcare does that, and now you've got just one choke point to control as opposed to many other. And then you also have the decimation of a fifth of the nation's economy through healthcare. Now the TPP is talking about corralling 90% of the world's economy, up to 90%. Okay, think about that. So this is all working. All of this is working like small cogs like small little cogs in a Swiss watch. They're all working together to create this global governance, and this is what this is all about. This is the rush toward the globalization, and this is why we see the Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, and liberals, the people who have sold their souls to the Satanistic Luciferian globalist plan. We no longer have that the Republican and Democrat. Well, why? Well, because it doesn't fit the globalist agenda. You're either a globalist or you're not. And that's why we've got this confusion that's why when you look at the various websites and conversation boards, forums, well, why, for example, why would this Democrat or this Republican vote with the Obama regime? Or why would this Democrat vote against the Obama regime? It doesn't make sense to me. The reason it doesn't make sense is you're not thinking big enough. You're not seeing the globalist picture. You're not seeing the end game here. Not you, the listener, but to the people who write things like that. This is the end game, and it's coming like a freight train, and it's coming. And you know what? At this point, it doesn't appear that there's going to be any stoppage to it. So what we have to do is react to get out of the way from it. And how we do that is going to depend on exactly where things land when the dust settles after things are passed, and people are going to wake up and say, "Oh wait, we've been gamed," and that's kind of where we're at with this.
That'll be an understatement.
Yeah, but see. But going back to today's news, and I know we've really covered a lot of information, and people's eyes are rolling back in their head, I'm sure. But going back to today's news, look at the Charleston event from yesterday. Look at that tragedy. Okay, well, that's how it's being described, as this tragic event. The management, the exploitation of this folks, it is going to be used once more. You've got the just as you have the drugs and the gun or guns and the pharmaceuticals, the weapons. In the case that this was a white on black crime. This was you'll find out that again that this guy was this young man was enamored by or associated with white supremacy groups. These are all force multipliers. This is why this is going to be a hinge moment in history, in American history, that will not just exploit the race division, but will exploit the Second Amendment rights of every American, and it will also go toward the safeguarding of the Christian and monotheistic religions to the extent where, for your safety, we have to outlaw the overt practice of all monotheistic religions and acquiesce toward a more diluted form of one world, or a single religion, so this doesn't happen anymore. That's how this is going to play out, and the mind-numbed, pharmaceutically inebriated populace are going to go right along with this, as they are going along with the militarization of the police, which will be the enforcement part, the drones, and the other part of it, the compliance part, the IRS. That will be the other aspect of things, and that's taking place. And the internet, it's got to be controlled. Well, how do we control the internet? Well, making it seem like this is a good thing. It's going to be via the TPP. You couldn't get access open people passed individually, so we're going to roll it into the TPP based on the input of some 500 or 600 corporations, and of course a tyrannical regime of a government, and wrap it up as a trade deal, and this is how it's all playing out. So in the coming days, you're going to see a renewed call for the confiscation, ultimately the confiscation, but at least now the control of purchases, possession of weapons, of guns, of ammunition. You're going to see this racial divide getting stronger, getting bigger, getting more volatile this summer as it heats up. It's June 18th already. You will see in July and August these events taking place more and more, and all in how they're managed and how they're manipulated, how they're reported by the Tavistock influenced media and the Tavistock Institute to, and I mention them because they shape the public perception of current events even today through their American counterparts, or the American offshoots like the Heritage Foundation and Stanford and other significant organizations. This is all mass mind control. And I know that sounds crazy, but you're programming a populace, and what better way to do it, but in that fashion. So this is the greatest deception we've ever seen. It goes back to we had talked about the Committee of 300, the Tavistock experiments, which began in 1921. These were all planned way back. All of this was planned back 100 years ago, and all of this genetic engineering, this mind control, if you will, this programming of people. All the experimentations that were done, the introduction of LSD, the introduction of drugs into the system. Why do you think the CIA? Why do you think the government is in the drug business? Is it to fund the black ops? Yes, but it's also to control the population, and it's also to fuel. It's also a depopulation method too, because you see gang wars over drugs. Well, hey. Shootings every day. Look at Chicago, even our hometown. It's all over drugs. This is a huge plan, and a lot of people can't see it because we're standing in front of this one big pine tree, yet behind that pine tree is a whole big forest, and that each tree is a component of this particular plan. That's the only way I know how to describe it. The beneficiaries of this plan, of course, are the global elite, and the global elite, the New World Order leaders, if you will, the international group of New World Order leaders, they too are influencing our policy of TPP. If you look at where the money's coming from, just go back, and I mentioned NAFTA. You go back into I mentioned earlier on January 9th, before Clinton took office, you had foreign lobbyists, foreign officials who were meeting with William Jefferson Clinton to lay out the foundations for NAFTA even before he got into office. There's nothing new under the sun here. I guess is what we're saying here. There's nothing new under the sun. We're seeing a production like no other. And we're seeing and the TPP will solidify the North American Union as well through other offshoots of the treaty. And I use the word treaty deliberately. But just like NAFTA did, North American Free Trade Agreement, it didn't benefit American workers. NAFTA provided an opportunity for the Mexican government to reduce its international obligations to American banks. This is the same thing that's going to be taking place with the TPP. Third world countries, we, America, will bow to third world countries economically. We're going to be paying their outstanding IMF liabilities at the expense of the middle class, which is the target of this particular deal. I mean, it can't be much. I don't know how to make it any clearer. Our freedom is being jeopardized by this putative president and this Congress and everyone voting in favor of the TPP, the TPA, and you know, those of us who have seen the litany of dirty tricks, political campaigns, should not be surprised. But the malicious tactics as the pro-TPA, TPP forces are ramming this iniquitous deal down the throats of the American public, of the sovereignty of this nation. We are forsaking the lives of our children and our grandchildren. And when it's all said and done, who are we going to have to blame for this? And don't forget the other aspect of this: the cultural degradation, the degradation of our culture, the continued abortion of our babies, the satanic rituals that are associated with the abortion of our unborn, as well as the pending Supreme Court decision that will likely legitimize, if you will, homosexual marriages, which is a term, and I want to thank the people who have sent in submissions for that. I'll be talking more about that tomorrow, but the bottom line here, anyone who has voted for the TPA and the TPP, and this applies with more deliberate force for the conservatives, the turncoats, than the Democrats or the progressives, liberals, Marxists, whatever you want to call them, brought shame and disgrace upon our republic form of government and every institution and the bedrock upon which this nation was built. Just go back to Ross Perot when he was talking about NAFTA. The legislators who voted for NAFTA turned the House into a house of ill repute. I think those were the words of Ross Perot.
Yep.
You know, so I mean, look, what we're seeing today, just as NAFTA was the Pearl Harbor in 1993 was the second Pearl Harbor, at least economically. TPP will be the final blow. It will be the World Trade Center tower attack or the attacks here in 2015. And we need to take note of that. We need to understand exactly that. So don't think too that or just understand too, as we talk about, as things are happening, as the Charlotte shootings are happening, and there will be more. I promise you there will be more. There's got to be more. Based on the plans, the schemes, the plots of the globalists, there will be more shootings like this. And they're going to become more brazen, and the time between the shootings it's going to get quicker. And the next thing to happen, and mark my words on this, the next thing, well, what will happen here in short order, you will hear of an attack inside the continental United States by ISIS, and that will provide this alleged legitimacy to open the doors of war against the foreign factions. That will give this government carte blanche to launch war, to initiate a war against Syria, against perhaps Iran, but it's very specifically to finish the job in Syria. Now that might seem like a very disjointed statement from something that doesn't connect with what we were talking about earlier, but the next event, it could be another Charleston, it could be another Sandy Hook, it could be another Batman-type shooting. But most assuredly, it will involve ISIS or the appearance of ISIS, at which point that will provide the legitimacy to reach out, to lash out, to create this war environment like we've never seen before. So understand more of these attacks are coming, and many of and don't think for 1 minute if the NSA knows what you're typing on your computer and you're nobody, you don't think that they don't know what's being planned by ISIS sympathizers and so-called ISIS terrorists. They don't know what these people are planning, or perhaps they may be, dare I say it, facilitating it. There you have it. But before the summer is out, you're going to see a major attack by, and this is, hey, I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but before the end of the summer, you're going to see a major attack accredited to ISIS, and that's going to bolster the need for additional security and the tightening down in the martial law. Jade Helm does fit into this. Greece, Joe, we didn't talk about this too. Greece right now is on the precipice.
Mm-hmm.
They're not.
They have not only said they're not paying back their debt, but they basically told Europe just to go.
Right. So, when you look at all of these events together, you can't afford to focus just merely on the blood in Charleston. Although we can't forget it, we can't just merely focus on that. Where does this fit into the grand scheme of things? Where does Greece, their economic perils, fit into this grand scheme of things? Do you think all of these incidents are unrelated? No, they're related, and they're being timed. They're being carefully timed. I know it sounds like a science fiction plot or some sort of Looney Tune thing, but these are all being timed almost with perfection in order to accomplish the stated one world order goal. And the Pope coming to the United States, unprecedented. And addressing the United Nations on climate change. Unprecedented. And you got Obama talking about climate change. And then, I will say this too, and I failed to mention this about Charleston. The comments made by Obama about Charleston, if you heard those, where he stated that the about the blacks being victims white on black crime. And also we have to do things like events like this don't happen in other countries with stronger gun control laws.
I did see that, yeah.
You can see where we're headed with this. You can see the bigger picture. Don't get caught up in the little. Acknowledge, understand, and assess the smaller aspects. Look at the bigger picture here. Look where we're headed.
There's some interesting news on the immigration front. With all the news coming out of Mexico, this enforcement. What enforcement? 3 recent items highlight the continuing collapse of interior immigration enforcement under Obama. First is the information pried out of DHS by Senators Grassley and Sessions. 121 convicted criminals who faced deportation orders between 2010 and 2014 were never removed from the country and now face murder charges, according to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Just to be clear, these were convicted criminals in ICE custody who had been ordered to be deported, but were instead released back into the United States and communities, and they went out to murder. And the Obama administration has been giving tips to these immigrants on how to not be deported and get assimilated into American society.
Huh. Okay.
Very interesting. And then there is one more story I thought was pretty out there for at least the explanation they gave, and my screen just froze up on me. It had to do with the defense systems that they're building in Cheyenne Mountain, the Pentagon. They're building protection networks around a lot of their equipment because of a feared Russian attack. I don't know if you saw that or heard that.
Say that one more time.
If you go to Drudge, because I can't right now. I think it's on the top left.
What about it?
It is.
What was the subject?
Pentagon. Pentagon is backing up or protecting their infrastructure, weapon infrastructure, due to buildup of potential attacks from Russia.
Okay, and that's okay. That's where we're. Yeah, I did see that. That's where we're headed with respect to Syria, Iran. Okay, this is a proxy. These are wars by proxy. We are actually, these are proxies, Syria, Iran, proxies of Russia. And we, just as we saw in Benghazi, the proxies, we're using proxies. They're using proxies, the various terrorist organizations. This soon, the proxies won't be good enough anymore, and of course we're going to be led into a third world war. All right? Now, that's the ultimate goal. And you talk about depopulation, that's part of it as well. I just noticed, too, when you mentioned about Drudge, let's go back to the Charleston shooting one more time. The ABC News is reporting that this killer, this monstrous Dylan Roof, who killed 9 people in this South Carolina church, had been planning something like this for 6 months. This, according to his roommate. Now, see, this is pretty convenient when you hear something like this. Now, I just want people to engage their critical thinking skills. If just make an assessment of that claim. Here you've got a roommate saying, well, this guy's been planning something like this for the last 6 months. He was big into segregation and other stuff. He wanted to start a civil war. He said he was going to do something like that and then kill himself. Now, okay.
I think of the Boston Marathon bombing friend.
But use the critical thinking skills. If you were the roommate, would you just...
It would never have happened.
Would you just keep that to yourself?
Absolutely not.
Of course not. So, okay.
I can say this, that you being my father, it would not keep to yourself.
No, you'd be duct taped and you'd be in a world of hurt. But see, so these little parts of these little bits of information, and we talk about the loss of our critical thinking, and this is why we've been really hot, or at least I have been really hot on talking about the programming by Tavistock, programming by these globalist entities, by Stanford, by MIT, by all of these offshoots, the Heritage Foundation. It's important to understand how we have been critically wounded in our ability to think critically, mortally wounded in our ability to think critically, because a statement like that should be challenged. How is this possible? How is this possible? They are laying the foundation. They're laying the foundation for a larger event, or I should say a larger objective here. And it's not going to be the pharmaceuticals they're going to go after. Although the pharmaceuticals in this play, I'm sure, played a role into making this individual pliable, mentally pliable, suggestible, and even, well, I guess that's sufficient. Suggestible, pliable, mentally, open to suggestion. And instead of going after the root cause, they're going to go after the resultant consequences of his actions, but doing so through gun legislation against, and even to a lesser extent, or equal extent perhaps, talking about we've got to do something about the religious violence. We've got to do something about this. So what do? Well,
thankfully, this wasn't religious violence.
Well, but see, it's going to be framed that way. Yeah. It's going to be framed as religious violence, white on black crime, and the use of guns. There's three components to this: the use of guns. It's a white on black crime, so it's racist, and it's an attack against Christianity or Christians, or said better.
Yeah, that's what doesn't fit.
Said better. It's an attack against the house of worship. That's a fundamentalist house of worship of a monotheistic religion. So, to avoid or to better protect those followers of the Christian followers, or to better protect the Jews, or to better protect the Muslims, what we need to do is maybe we ought to just come together and under the unification of a single religion. That way, there's little offense, because you can spin this as he was targeting Christians. You can spin this as he was targeting blacks. And he was also using a gun. What a trifecta in the New World Order monstrosity. I mean, you can't ask for... You could not orchestrate anything better. Guns, blacks, and Christians. Or more specifically, the use of guns to commit a crime, a race-based crime against the white-on-black race-based crime, and the hate crime against Christians, a monotheistic religion that is intolerable in a New World Order scenario. I mean, thinking bigger, okay? You have to think a lot bigger.
Well, we will definitely see in the coming days and weeks how this is played out, how this is presented, the twists and turns. You know what's interesting? I don't have my other computer with me, but you know how this happened with Sandy Hook, but regardless of Sandy Hook, this is completely different. There are indexes on Yahoo News, Google News, Huffington Post, all dated from the 11th of June with the title of that story. Don't ask me how they do it. I don't know if they go back and change it after the fact. I have the screenshot. We'll have to look at it later.
Perhaps we fell into a time. My goodness, you know what? We blew through the entire. We've got 60 seconds left of the program. I can't believe this. My apologies, folks. I want to thank you very much for tuning in tomorrow night. I can't believe that we blew through the top of the hour, last top of the hour. We just continued. Tomorrow night, Josh Peck talking about the quantum physics of, well, you got to tune in tomorrow night.
Quantum creation.
Yeah, the dimensionality. He's going to better explain the dimension aspect of things and how the dimensions are so important in our life and what that's all about. It's going to be a really great program. I guarantee it. Can't explain it almost, but no, it's going to be a great show. Tomorrow night, Josh Beck. By the way, tonight I just want to thank AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com for being our partners. AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Please visit their website. It's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Also, HealthMasters.com. You want to be prepared. You want to be healthy. HealthMasters.com. AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com.